Last week, I told you my story. I spoke about friendships, relationships, and the quiet fear that some experiences leave behind. A fear that doesn't always disappear when the relationship ends. Sometimes it follows us into new friendships, new relationships, new beginnings. When I finished that episode, I thought I had finally said everything I wanted to say. Instead, people started telling me their stories. Some were people I've known for years. Some I hadn't spoken to in a very long time. Today, they are living in different parts of the world, different cultures, different lives, yet somehow their stories kept circling back to the same feeling. Not anger, not resentment, just a quiet fear of letting someone matter again. Every story you'll hear today was shared anonymously to protect the identities of the people behind them. I've used AI generated voices to re narrate their words. The voices may not be theirs, but the experiences and the emotions behind them are. As I listened, I noticed something interesting. Almost every story started in the same place. Not with healing, not with heartbreak, with one memory, one friendship, one relationship, one experience that quietly changed the way they trusted people. So I asked one simple question. Can you remember the relationship or friendship that changed the way you trust people?
I don't think mine was a breakup. It was actually my best friend. We talked almost every day. There wasn't really a week that went by without us talking. Then they started dating someone, and honestly, I was happy for them. I expected things to change a little, but eventually I started noticing that if I didn't send the first message, we just didn't talk. And one day, I decided not to text. It wasn't really a test. I think I just wanted to know if they'd notice. They didn't. We haven't spoken in almost 2 years now, and I don't really think about that friendship every day anymore. But I do notice that whenever I become close to someone new, there's always this little thought in the back of my head, like, how long before this happens again?
I kept thinking about one sentence. I wanted to know whether they would notice. I wonder how many of us have done exactly that. Stopped reaching out, not because we would stop caring, but because we wanted to know whether the relationship could survive without us carrying it.
Relationship. That changed trust mine was my first serious relationship. We were together for almost 3 years. People always ask me, "So, what happened?" And honestly, I'm never quite sure how to answer that, because there wasn't one big fight. Nobody cheated. Nobody suddenly walked away. It was just little things. Replies became shorter. Phone calls happened less often. Plans slowly turned into maybe next weekend. And I remember convincing myself, they're probably just busy. Looking back, I think the relationship had ended long before we actually broke up. We just hadn't admitted it yet. And that changed something in me. Now, if someone's energy changes, even just a little, my mind quietly starts preparing for goodbye, even when there's no real reason to.
That answer surprised me, not because of what she said, because of what she didn't. She never once blamed him. She never called him a bad person. She simply described what distance feels like.
For me, I don't think it was one person. It was moving away. Before I left, everyone said we'd stay close. We'll call every week. We'll visit. Nothing is going to change. And for the first few months, they were right. We spoke all the time. Then calls became messages. Messages became birthday wishes. And eventually, even those became less frequent. Nobody betrayed me. Nobody did anything terrible. People just kept living their lives. I think that's what changed me. Not realizing that people can leave. I already knew that. It was realizing that sometimes people don't even notice that they've left.
That sentence stayed with me. Sometimes they don't even realize they have left. I think that's something we don't talk about enough. Not every relationship ends because somebody did something wrong. Sometimes life simply pulls two people in different directions. No villains, no dramatic ending, just two people slowly becoming strangers. As those conversations continued, I noticed another pattern. People weren't describing the moment someone left, they were describing the months before, the uncertainty, the overthinking, the silence. So naturally, another question came to my mind. I asked them, what does it actually feel like when someone slowly drifts away?
Honestly, I think someone slowly drifting away is worse than them just leaving, because if someone actually ends the friendship, at least you know. When they're drifting away, you're constantly asking yourself questions. Are they busy? Did I say something? Am I expecting too much? Should I message them again? Or should I just leave them alone? And I remember doing that constantly, going back through conversations, trying to figure out if I'd said something wrong. It's exhausting, not really because they're gone, it's because you don't know if they're gone.
I don't actually remember our last conversation. I've tried to, and that's probably the strangest part. I remember conversations before it. I remember saying things like, "We should catch up soon." I remember thinking everything was probably fine, but I couldn't tell you what our last conversation was. One day, there just wasn't another one. No argument, no goodbye, nothing. We just stopped being part of each other's lives. And I think that's why it stayed with me, because there was never really an ending.
Maybe that's why gradual endings are so difficult. Our minds keep searching for a moment that never actually existed. We keep asking ourselves, when did everything change? Maybe there wasn't one moment. Maybe it happened so slowly that neither person realized they were already saying goodbye. As these conversations continued further, I stopped wondering how people were abandoned. I became curious about something else. What happens after? How does that experience quietly change us without us even noticing? So I asked another question. Have you ever changed the way you behaved because you were afraid of losing someone? The answers couldn't have been more different.
Oh, absolutely. I became the person who always apologized, even when I wasn't really wrong. If there was an argument, I'd be the one trying to fix it. If plans changed, I'd say it was fine. If something upset me, I'd usually convince myself it wasn't worth bringing up. And at the time, I thought I was just being understanding. But looking back, I don't think I was protecting the friendship. I think I was protecting myself from being left again.
I think I became whatever people wanted me to be. which sounds terrible when I say it out loud. But yeah. Where do you want to eat? Whatever you want. What movie do you want to watch? I don't care, you choose. What do you want to do this weekend? Whatever works for you. And I genuinely thought I was just really easygoing. But somewhere along the way, I stopped asking myself what I actually wanted. Because I think part of me believed, if I'm easy enough to be around, maybe people won't have a reason to leave.
I think after that, I stopped depending on people as much. And I know that sounds like independence, but I don't think it completely was. I still wanted friends. I still wanted connection. But I always kept a little bit of distance because I didn't want to build my whole life around someone and then have to rebuild it when they disappeared. It's strange. You spend your whole life wanting connection, and then suddenly you're also scared of it.
One person became quieter, another apologized more. Neither of them realized they were doing the same thing, trying to make themselves easier to leave. That answer stayed with me. You are scared of connection. I think that's the cruelest part of fear. It convinces us that the very thing we are looking for is also the thing most likely to hurt us. As I listened, I noticed something. Nobody reacted the same way. Some people chased, some people withdrew, some became people pleaser, others became emotionally unavailable. Different behaviors, the same fear. That made me wonder if this wasn't just about personal experiences anymore. Maybe this was something bigger. So I asked one final question before we began talking about healing. Why do you think genuine connections feel harder today?
I don't actually think people are afraid of commitment. I think they're afraid of getting it wrong again. Because once you've trusted someone completely, and that trust is broken, you don't stop wanting love. You don't stop wanting a relationship. You just hold a little more of yourself back. Not because you don't care, but because you're trying to protect the parts of you that took so long to put back together.
I do think social media and dating apps change something. Because there's always this feeling that there might be someone better. You can literally open your phone and see hundreds of other people. So the moment a relationship becomes uncomfortable, or someone isn't exactly what we imagined, it's really easy to think, maybe I should just move on. And I don't know if that's made relationships worse, but I definitely think it's made patience harder.
Honestly, I think everybody is just tired. People are working, moving, trying to build careers, paying bills, dealing with their own problems. And sometimes relationships become another thing you're trying to squeeze into your schedule. I don't think that necessarily means people care less. I think life just gets really loud. And sometimes the people we care about get lost in that noise.
Three completely different answers, and yet none of them said they didn't want connections. They still wanted friendships, still wanted relationships, still wanted people. They were simply more careful about who they allowed close enough to hurt them. As our conversations came to an end, there was one question I knew I wanted to ask everyone. Not about the people who left, but about the person they used to be before all of it happened. Because sometimes looking back is the only way we realize how far we have actually come. By the end of every conversation, I found myself asking one last question, not about what happened, not about who left, but about the person they used to be. I asked, if you could sit down with the version of yourself who was terrified of being left behind, what would you say? Some people answered immediately, others needed a long silence first.
I'd probably tell him to stop trying so hard. I spent years believing that if I was just a better friend, more understanding, more available, people would stay, and I don't believe that anymore. A friendship can't survive because one person refuses to let it die. The people who genuinely want to be part of your life, you shouldn't have to constantly convince them. Clip of 5, fear of abandonment/healing. Fear of abandonment taught me that I spent years trying to keep friendships alive that only existed because I kept holding on. Healing taught me that friendship shouldn't feel like something I have to earn every single day.
I'd probably hug her first, before saying anything, because I remember how much she blamed herself. If someone became distant, my first thought was always, what did I do? Every goodbye felt like confirmation that maybe I just wasn't enough. I wish she'd known that people sometimes leave because of what's happening in their own lives, not because there's something wrong with you. Those are two very different things. It just took me a long time to understand that.
I tell myself, don't confuse distance with rejection. That took me a long time to understand. Someone can move away. Someone can speak to you less. Someone's life can completely change. And that doesn't necessarily mean everything you shared suddenly meant nothing. Some people really do care about you. Life just takes them somewhere else. Not every goodbye means somebody stopped loving you.
Those answers surprised me, not because they were hopeful, because they were gentle. None of these people spoke to themselves with anger. They spoke with compassion. Maybe healing begins there. Not when someone else apologizes, not when someone else comes back, but when we stop blaming ourselves for every single goodbye. Before we ended, I asked everyone to complete 2 sentences. I told them not to overthink it. Just say the first thing that felt true. The first sentence was, fear of abandonment taught me. And the second, healing taught me. Those were their answers.
Fear of abandonment taught me that I spent years trying to keep friendships alive that only existed because I kept holding on. Healing taught me that friendship shouldn't feel like something I have to earn every single day.
Fear of abandonment taught me to expect rejection before it had even happened. Healing taught me that the next person deserves to meet me, not the version of me that someone else hurt.
Fear of abandonment taught me to expect that everybody would eventually leave. Healing taught me that distance doesn't erase the people who genuinely care about you.
Fear of abandonment taught me that somewhere along the way, I abandoned myself first. Healing taught me that the people worth keeping never required me to stop being myself.
Fear of abandonment taught me to build walls before anyone had actually given me a reason to. Healing taught me that protecting yourself from pain and preventing yourself from being loved can sometimes look exactly the same.
When I started these conversations, I thought I was collecting stories. But somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't. I was listening to people describe the invisible ways our past follows us into our future. Different countries, different ages, different lives, different experiences. Yet somehow, so many people carried the same quiet questions. Should I trust this person? Should I get attached? What if they leave too? Maybe those questions never completely disappear. Maybe they become a little quieter. Maybe healing isn't reaching a place where you are certain nobody will ever leave. Because none of us can promise that. People change, relationships change, life changes. Maybe healing is something much simpler. Maybe it's meeting someone new without asking them to carry the weight of everyone who came before them. Maybe it's allowing a new friendship to be a new friendship, not another chance for history to repeat itself. If you have listened to both parts of this conversation, thank you. And if somewhere in these voices you heard a little bit of yourself, I hope you also heard this. One person's decision to leave doesn't decide your worth, it doesn't decide your future, and it doesn't get to decide how every new story begins. And maybe you have a story of your own. Maybe you have experienced the fear of being left behind. Maybe you're still trying to understand how it changed you. Or maybe you are finally learning how to let people in again. If you feel comfortable sharing, I would love to hear your story. You can leave it in the comments or reach out to me privately if you'd rather keep it anonymous. Because if there's one thing these conversations have reminded me of, it's that sometimes hearing someone else's say, I've felt that too, can make our own experiences feel a little less lonely. And maybe your story could do that for someone else. And with that, I've completed another 10 kilometers walk. Thank you to everyone who trusted me enough to share a piece of their story. And thank you for walking with us. If conversations like this are something you'd like to keep walking with me through, you can follow or subscribe to My Optimistic Life. There are many more conversations I would like us to have. Until then, take care of yourself, and I'll see you on the next walk on My Optimistic Life. Thank you.